feels like things are spiraling into a dangerous position here in 37. What the Germans are going to do is they're going to attempt a coup on Spain. They have pretty good modifiers. Because it's Spain, there's a +3 stability value, where our initiative is under the Spanish willpower. And nobody's put a coup cell in place, so they can't cancel it. That's the only use of those things. They don't really sound like coup cells to me. There's no requirement to have a coup cell in order to do this, which to me feels kind of funny. But okay. So our net is there are no alliances involved, so we just have a +3 on the modifier. The danger is the average roll of 7 or higher will cause a civil war. We kind of wish we had less of a chance, but this makes it more likely that we don't get a counter coup. And a counter coup is bad because we could get implicated in that. So we pay $5. We got the #1 position. France paid money. They're either going to run an election or upgrade their production. I'm not sure which. So we roll a 5. I said +3 is 8. It's a coup, 2 dice. That means I get to roll 2 dice worth of political control. Now, I think I can activate them immediately as well if I wish. So we'll see what we get here. But this will get us more points than we would have otherwise. So I think we get 6 points on the map, on the board. Yeah. So that helps us a bit. It's not tremendous. 6 doesn't seem all that great, but we could immediately activate them. We might be able to use the Russian points. No, they're kind of close to Russia. We're only going to get like 3 spaces from this, so that's not as powerful as I would have liked. I had hopes of getting more than that. There are no other effects to the coup. We look over here. As long as we're not implicated, we don't suffer, any minuses. And they're as though we went to war with it if we're implicated. So it is kind of risky. I'm not sure if there's anywhere else we want to affect. So I mean, you can imagine what the points would be on there. I haven't made my decision yet if that's what I'm doing. And I'd rather not do it on camera. France gets off their election. I triggered Sweden instead, which I'm pulling closer. I'm going to wait until I've got a lot of points in Spain. The danger with this, of course, is people might end up playing a coup cell. But it's actually kind of apparent if you do, I think. So, for example, you pick a 0. It may not be clear where you put it, but most things that you do with a 0 are going to be apparent. The only one that might not be is secretly buying 1 AP for a specified minor. That might be the same as a coup in a lot of ways. However, right after Spain had a coup occur in it, somebody might be buying a coup cell at that point. It's always risky to bring the League of Nations into things, if anybody was considering that, just because you don't know which powers are going to be able to be allowed to vote out of the minors. All the majors are allowed to vote who are present. Germany's not in the League. This is prior to their attempt to enter. I think they actually re-entered, or entered it. Anyway, so now we're just at the production and, get the bids and see what people buy. And the Japanese are holding off till next year to do another production multiple, I think, because we're pushing far enough along here that it just doesn't seem, seems like we might as well wait, because 37 to 38 is where the break off comes in terms of points. So everybody's a little kind of nervous about doing something in 37 at this time. The Japanese took over Dutch New Guinea, and now they have all of it. I have no way of marking that. There's no control markers of that nature here. Honestly, other than production multiplier, I'm not sure this map is really useful if you're playing the combined game. You might be able to play the whole thing without using it. Certainly there's aspects of it I would rather not use. I ended up triggering Hungary instead of Czechoslovakia because of the piles of pieces around, and I said screw it. France didn't really want to do that, but they're okay with it. Rather than I calculated it on Czechoslovakia. I also noticed that I had Italy and Japan stacked, which was illegal. I thought that was the case, but I managed to find the rule that said it was the case. It's finding the specific instance when you remember something in this game is a pain in the ass. It's not well referenced. It's not well indexed into different fashions. It looks like WIF is a lot better put together, and probably Days of Decision 3 is too. I mean, from what I can see online, there's absolutely no support for this sucker, no errata, nothing. It's like they came up with it and said, oops, we're working on final edition and it doesn't really quite work with this. So this is like some lousy precursor, and they spent too much money on it, but given what it is, I mean, I didn't spend a fortune on it, but more than I should have, knowing what it is, because now I think I'm gonna have to pick up DoD3 if I really get kind of into this, and that's kind of sad. Production-wise, nobody built anything up. Nobody's planning on making their big move yet. The Japanese might do a big build-up, though, starting in 37. I probably am going to want to go to war with China. Just because China has not just resources, but it has factories, too, and it just adds up to so much. Okay, well, this time Japan cut a treaty with Italy, single level. Still looking at trying to get to the Netherlands or something, I think. I'm not quite sure the value of this except to drive up U.S. tensions. We're almost at the point. I'll have to calculate them, but Japan itself is at like 57. So the rest of the Axis is kind of scared in terms of doing anything. The Italians got a chance to agree to this. Was not an assured thing if we had failed. Before that, the Russians, what did the Russians do? The Russians cooed Spain themselves, and they drove it right into their camp by, they got, I don't know, they had like 9 points on it, and were able to misuse the German points in such a way that they were able to then drive other negative Axis power and capitalist powers to get it right on top of them. So now they more or less get all of Spain's production, if they wish it, and more importantly, they steal it from the Germans here. We're not going to start things, next turn nobody's going to be starting a war, so I don't think we'll see much production here. Unless it's the big war, in which case maybe. So we'll see what the Japanese have point-wise, but they just don't have the kind of production to really scare away the U.S. all that much. Well, the U.S. has nothing banked either. Could be a weird situation. Even with the big points, the 57 points towards Japan, we're still only like 30, a little under 30. Out of the 60 that we need. When you start subtracting all the Soviet points, which are quite large at 32, and half of, actually I think I forgot the Commonwealth, so we might even be less than that, half of the Democratic points. So nobody's quite ready to start things yet. No reason to gear up quite yet. November, December, we're not going to declare war in 37. We're going to wait until those U.S. Advantages or penalties go down a little bit for doing anything. And, you know, Germany, Japan, they probably want to gear up a level before they start doing anything. Germany's going to be scary, though, because they got to set themselves up for Czechoslovakia. Nobody's got any armies being built here for the reasons I mentioned. But, you know, Germany and Japan have a lot of money. Italy has a decent amount. Russia is huge, though. They've got a good deal in the bank, too, because they're cranking out at 1 multiple, which is what everybody else is at. And they can just shoot their multiple up, you know, as long as they're as long as they're lower than the Germans, they can keep shooting it up. Now, right now, they're tied with the Germans, so they don't have any opportunity to do so. But they're fairly effective because of the purge, and that's one of the big things is, you know, if you have your effectiveness up, you can spend a few bucks and pretty much guarantee that you're going to get an action, at least at this point. At other points in the game, it may be so important to get an action that everybody's bidding heavily, but for the most part, people are just bidding 1, figuring, well, I'll take a fallow turn, drop down here, and get my bonus if I've got effectiveness. If I don't have effectiveness, I've got a more problematic situation because I got to build big, I got to bid big, get myself up here, and then I got to keep running it, and you know that just keeps you running too hot, where you run out of money. That's kind of where the U.S. is here, with only $7 left. But the U.S. has some real problems, no effectiveness because being the loser in the naval game, something neatly engineered by Germany, where the Western Allies pretty much had to all say, all right, which one of us is taking the fall? Well, it may be the U.S. isn't the right one because Japan's beginning to look like such a threat. So we may have to start building up our navy. Well, Spain is just high on the coup list, and mainly because people don't have anything too exciting to do. And Germany pulls one off again. Basically had one each turn. This time, though, it's a civil war. And for the Civil War, we go to the Civil War table. And we roll, I think, just 1 die. I'm not sure. For the Army points and 1 for the Navy. Okay, so the Army, we'll use the red die for. And the government's going to be supported by the Soviets. And the Germans will be the rebellion. Okay, so the government gets 30% of the Army, 70% of the Army goes to the rebels, and the Navy will be split 50-50. And we look, and they've got 9 ships, which is going to be a problem because 50-50 is 4.5. Both round up, supposedly. That doesn't make any sense. It says the results determine what part of the miners goes to the rebels. So I'm going to give the majority to the rebels. So there'll be 5 ships. And I gotta find 4 Russian ships, and I'm afraid that's just impossible. So I'll take some French ones. Not impossible in terms of them having the numbers, just impossible in terms of countermix. There isn't enough. And then for the troops, what did I say? 70-30. We're at 29. Let's see what we get. So the rebels will get 20, and the government gets only 9, which looks like it's going to be over fast. Now, when the coup is done, if the rebels win, it changes the counter from the Republic back to the Nationalists. And I assume if they win again, if there's another coup and it goes, and the rebels win again, it goes Republic again. So Spain's particularly a good place to coup because it changes the national allegiance. The Spanish nationals will not go with France or the USSR. The Spanish Republic will not go with Italy. And They're just going to fight out offensives until somebody gets the entire territory of Spain. So I got to get my 20 points of German tanks there. And now other players can support the rebellion, and if they do so, they can gain control of that side for whatever that's worth. I've largely run out of Japanese counters. Here's one I can use here. Let's put a -1 in Turkey. I've got quite a few places where I'm using non-game markers. They're not limited by counter mix, but because of the weird situation, Japan managed to go rather deep in the turn to get an alliance with Italy. They got very lucky that Italy got a chance. In exchange for this, Japan is trading away one of its factories to Italy to give it a shot at getting the Netherlands. This is a really weird situation where Japan may be actually heavily involved in Europe. Yes, the war is getting very silly, but that's okay. That allows Japan to pursue kind of a Europe first strategy in conjunction with like Italy and Germany, perhaps. We'll see how it works. Japan's not going to be allowed to base in Italian areas, though. I thought they were when I read the war, the naval movement rules. But then when I looked at the alliance rules, they're not allowed to base in any Italian areas unless Italy and Japan are at war against the same thing. Until level 3. If they can get a level 3 alliance, which they'll be working towards, then they can actually cooperate kind of fully. And we had some political changes. Mexico is beginning to drift towards the Axis, or the, yeah. And I don't know. Overall, it's an interesting situation. We'll see where we're going with it. What about other people? Germany did the Civil War in Spain. We're not at the combat phase yet. The Brits have decided to support that Civil War, which means they can ship up to 6 strength points into Spain, and they can also pay for up to 7 more units in Spain. The Germans can't pay. They just triggered the war. The Japanese could have tried to support the war in Spain, which would have been weird. And what did the Russians do? The Russians got an economic interest over in Poland to get themselves a factory because they're planning on starting to produce and getting ready for war. We might... the Soviets have a problem declaring war, though. They have a lot of penalties towards declaring war against a major power, which will keep them out of a declaration against either Japan or Germany. However, they have no such restriction against declaring war against minors. So, what I can't find is the partitioning of Poland. That may be required. That may be part of the Danzig Corridor rule in specific. Because I think the Russians are going to start occupying things. I think they're going to start taking miners out and just grabbing territory. I don't see much reason not to. Yeah, Italy responded. So I guess the next thing we do is we roll the weather. And we're over in November, December, which is not good. We get winter. Winter, I don't think has many effects. I'll have to look that up. Wrong about that. If the weather is winter, severe winter, army points cannot invade. Additionally, the winner has less than 10 to 1. The winner's losses are 50% of commitment. Between 10 and 20 to 1, the winner loses 25%. 20 to 1 or greater, the winner loses nothing. As opposed to the normal rules here. So now we come to the guessing game. And point-wise, the Brits have put their points in there. 5, 6, 10, 15 for them, to 20 for the Germans. Now, neither side has to commit fully. If both sides did, let's just think what we have here. 15 times 1.25 is going to be 19. So we'll be over the 1.25 if we commit, which means normally that would be the winner loses 25% and the loser loses half. On the other hand, because of winter, it's both sides would lose half their commitment. If we don't commit much, though, the Germans could win the whole war and it would be over. Notably, there's only, what, this looks like 6? Looks like there's 6 points in Spain as the maximum capture. Jeez. There's Spaniards all over. Shit, I forgot about those guys. Well, we'll have to figure out how to set those up. From what I see, essentially 5 of these went over to the Germans anyway by recalculating, and 1 to the Brits. So they actually all show up in the home country, though. Fighting doesn't happen over here. These just get abstracted away, from what I can tell. So now we have 25 facing 5, 6, 16. Now 16 times 1.25 is only 20, which means the Germans could allocate only 20 and get the 1.25. They're not going to get a better ratio than that. So I think they want to. I think basically the Germans want to allocate 20, but we might want to. This is so deterministic that you have to make these thoughts about, gee, what are the calculations? How does it all fucking work? So if we're looking at 20 versus this 16, well, if we're saying, yeah, we're going to lose 1.25, well, the English then would say, okay, well, let's say the Germans did send 20. We want to make sure that we can keep the ratio so that they gain the least in terms of points. Now, here's a problem. There's like political points over here that the Brits got for supporting and the Japanese got for their treaty with Italy. And now there's going to be conquest points, which will also be marked with the same markers. I'm not sure you should be able to get any political support with a minor, but the problem is, why the hell would you support, you want some kind of influence on the country. You feel like you deserve it. And there's nothing that says one way or the other what happens. In fact, there's nothing that says these disappear when the revolution is over or anything like that. So you kind of have to make it up and figure out what goes on. And to me, it makes sense that the government is going to be the one that's responding and that the rebels probably are pretty neutral towards everyone. So in terms of the offensives here, though, let's say we're looking at that 20 to 16. Well, 20 to 11 is good enough. And then do the Germans want to make sure that they don't lose half their army on a 20 to 11 attack? So basically, I'm going to roll, go big, go little, go medium, whatever, and see what we have. But go big for the Germans means commit all 20. And go big for the Brits means, I think, commit everything. We'll see. The Germans committed 18, the Brits committed 16. That means the ratio is 1, which I think is really the best that could happen because it's winter. This is So I don't know if there's a winner or a loser, though, because it's not the 1.25. So we got to look for that. Yeah, see, I wish that there was not a winner or a loser in that case, because actually there's no reason for the Germans to have gone big. So the Germans will gain 1 offensive point. Remember, they only need 6 total. And what did I say they went with? They went with 18 to 16. So the Brits are going to lose 8, and the Germans are going to lose 9. And we'll just withdraw those from the forces present. Okay, and after purchases, and marking the bids down, the Brits built up the 7 points they could build in Spain. That's actually their entire economy. And you gotta kind of wonder, what are they doing there? You know, it's not that terrible if the Germans win the war there. And there's not much advantage to this war. It's not like you get to test out your technology or anything like that. That's not covered in it. So there's no real big goal to getting the war. The only big thing is you kind of don't want Spain all the way over here, which is where they were, which is why we tried for the Civil War, was to get Spain out of their hands, because that's kind of troublesome if we take France and then we're facing Spain if we attack the Soviets. But from the British side, do they really want to defend this? I don't know. Maybe. Outside of that, money-wise, the Russians are just kicking butt with cash. The Japanese are doing pretty well. Russia's got so much money, they're thinking about an invasion of Turkey, but not right away. They don't want to do it in January, February. They don't want to do it while the weather's crappy. So they're looking at maybe May, June doing an invasion of Turkey. Terrain doesn't matter in this. You know, it's just kind of represented by these crossing arrows or whatever, which I think is a little weird, but okay. And, you know, the reason for Turkey is because they have a factory. Poland is also tasty, but we're getting, you know, the fruits of that factory already. Likewise, Romania doesn't have a factory. What's nice about things like Poland and Romania, though, is they get us further west if the Germans come in. So we might consider something along those lines. It also neutralizes a possible enemy of ours. So yeah, that's kind of where my thinking is right now. And that is the end of 37, which means people might be interested in gearing up to their maximum peacetime limits next turn. Germany especially, so they can start doing things like grabbing Czechoslovakia and stuff like that. They got to worry, though, because there's the possibility of you know, if Russia's building up a huge army, of them breaking their garrison limits. It's tough. You think they need like they need a 2-to-1 for being Soviet, for being communist. Make it 3-to-1 for being the Russians, I think. There's just this whole list. And it gets worse if they make a pact with the Germans, but that's okay. Anyhow, I guess we're ready to move on. So in the new year, the bids were not heavily in favor of some of the Axis powers, so they were willing to kind of wait it out because they'll get a bounce. They have good effectiveness. And we ended up with France, England, and China. England and China put some bids in. France was going off bonuses from last turn. China doesn't get much bonus, so they threw a lot of money in. France and China wanted to gear up, and they did so. That had some effect on the U.S. Entry, of course. The Brits held their election. They were like, well, if this gets cleared now, that's great. Later, maybe we'll need it, you know, for an invasion of Czechoslovakia or whatever to stand up and prevent the Germans from getting the Sudetenland, because it's pretty easy for them to get if the Brits are going before them. Now, the Brits can fall behind, but that doesn't help unless you're in the range that gets to do something. War in Spain, mud. Both sides lost half basically, and the Germans have gained another space. So now they have this factory and one of these resources under their control. I don't know what that all means. I think no production can come out of Spain. There's nothing in the rules that seems to say that, but it just does not make sense that in the midst of a civil war that there'd be such going on. Anyway, that's where we are. We had some miners triggered. I think Romania got triggered, and I see the Poles got triggered and pushed over here. I'm not sure why Romania is kicking around. Ah, yes, they did too, and they're on top of the Brits, which means now all their stuff goes to the Brits. The Germans don't get the points there. Yeah, the combination of this and the board is so confusing to try to hold together who's getting what production from where. I mean, what I want to do is I want to mark, the production somewhere on the map or something to show me where it's coming from, because it seems wrong for the Germans, to have this marker here and not be getting anything from it. But if I do that, I lose track of the economic treaty that's actually in place. So I have to kind of run from one place to the other to try to figure out who's got what production. And those production tracks, I guess those factories could be flagged over in some way or kept track of on paper, but likewise the production multiple, that's what this really would hold in terms of value in a whiff game, I think. Obviously the armies moving around aren't going to be there. Oh, and the political influence in all the countries. It's a lot of map to be using, for that kind of information. I feel like maybe some sheets of paper would do better, but they'd have to be arranged by the country with room for everything. And there's, 28 different countries or something to keep track of over here. So I just don't know. Anyway, I got to take the production into hand, and I got to consider in my mind, hey, is Germany going to be possibly starting the war in the Sudetenland? I think it's less likely in this than in the old DOD. I think in the old DOD, if you pulled it off wrong, you ended up at war. And I don't think that's the case in this one. I think it just fails. No one blew money on their armies again, mainly because the weather's not going to be very good. In terms of the Sudetenland, if I demand that, yes, the Allies can cancel it, and then they kind of form an alliance. So if the Brits back Czechoslovakia, they get a casus belli. It's like a guarantee option. If the French do it, they're backing the Little Entente, and they can back Romania and Yugoslavia in the same way. So they get a somewhat more powerful option. Russia is probably going to go after Turkey very soon, but not this turn. They got 50-something bucks in the bank, huge amounts of cash. They could easily build an army that can run into Turkey, and they'd like to do that. But otherwise, well, this next turn they're probably not going to run that up. They may well get a cheap initiative, but declaring war seems foolish. They'd rather try to do something else. So for this turn, Germany got the first bid. They upped their production again to 2. This is their maximum peacetime. If they're not at war with a major power, they can't boost it above that. They also built some troops, basically in the fear of things look like they're starting to get ugly. The U.S. upped their production, I think. They actually put a bid in, like a $7 bid. That's why they have almost no money left, like $2 even after that production change. There's an interesting facet to this game compared to the old days of Decision, I think. In the old days of Decision, I think there was a political effectiveness, and I think it was a die roll to see if you got your action off. That's kind of modified by this bidding situation. I don't remember the old one very well, but here, money kind of trumps your bids. If you want to spend your money on getting, or money kind of trumps your political effectiveness. If you want to spend your money on getting something out in an action in play, you can guarantee that you can pretty much get an action just by throwing a big bid in. Obviously, though, if you're not doing very well with money, you aren't going to have a big bid. But the point is that your political effectiveness determining as a bid bonus just means that you kind of you can get surpassed if the economies get big enough and people really want to do things where you can no longer do things. Of course, on the other hand, you're almost guaranteed to be able to do something. And I kind of remember in the old game, if you didn't have your political effectiveness up, you couldn't do shit. I mean, you'd make your die, you'd get your chance to do it. You'd pick your selection, you'd roll your die, and you'd be like, not this time. Japan, I think, made a mistake. They should have geared up this turn. Everybody else is gearing up, right? They were planning on an attack on China. I think they're going to go with a limited war, just because that reduces U.S. entry. It reduces the amount of the per turn U.S. entry, but I may just go with the full war with the hopes of taking the Chinese out. But when I start looking at the numbers that I have, I don't have much more of an army in Manchuria than China has. And I was only able to build another 30 troops. Now, granted, I can still build at a higher rate than China can. But it's not, and I can keep China from increasing their production as well by only doing limited war. But it's just not, it doesn't look feasible, and the amount of offensive advantages I get is divided by 5. However, if the Chinese defend themselves well, that means I don't get offensives to a large degree, and that means U.S. entry doesn't go up as much as it would if I do the full war. So there's some reason to keep it at limited war, and I've got to decide on that. And then I've also got to decide, did I make a mistake, and do I need to get my production multiple up before I start this war and start getting my troops piled in? Because I put about all the money I have. Now, on the other hand, China doesn't have any money, really. They have $6 saved up, and their production's not going to go any higher. So I may be better off not getting them shooting into the 2 times multiplier by starting a full war there. So instead, what I did was I took the 0 option. I wasn't really intending on getting a bid here. And now I have a 3 times my political effectiveness, which is a 3, as my multiplier, or as my bid bonus. So now I have a +9 bid bonus next time. That's a big deal. Somebody has to spend a good amount of change to beat that. Now, we're at the stage in the game where people could, but maybe they're not that interested in doing so because they also need to build up their armies. So there's a big opportunity cost to trying to exceed something like that. Russia did an economic agreement with Bulgaria, which they absolutely do not need, but they did it to push Bulgaria over into their zone, and they're planning on signing a treaty or whatever with Bulgaria and bringing it into a war with Turkey. They don't have to sign the treaty. If the declaration of war with Turkey pushes Bulgaria into their side anyway, they can bring them into the war. And that'll help them a little bit, I think, although there's some danger that the Turks will counterattack out of the Bosporus space and be able to actually conquer Bulgaria, which would be kind of embarrassing, honestly. But I think that I can get a lot of ground. And I built a huge army. I spent, all that big money that I have. I have an army as big as anyone's ready to go into Turkey. France actually got an action too. They're the last person to do so. They geared up as well. Now the Germany's geared up. We'll have to figure out what the U.S. entry is, but I can't do that right this moment. And then everyone else had a pass, but we had armies building up. The war in Spain is grinding on. You can see the numbers 4 versus 3. It looks like the fascists will win, or the nationalists will win. I don't really want to use the term fascist for them because they may have been less aligned to that term, but the pro-authoritarian or whatever side is doing well. Now that doesn't really give much to the Germans. So it is kind of a sideshow right now because it looks like things are beginning to boil up. But if no one throws forces in, it looks like the Germans are likely to win eventually. Just this is a game. It's so deterministic in the combat that if one person gets a good value, then it gets a little bit more strength. It's really unlikely that the other person's going to beat him, but you could do it by trickery. So, for example, Germany, if you're in a big area like Russia, there's more room for trickery. There's not as much here because we're looking at, 4, 6 maximum for full conquest. If you end up I'm trying to think of the right term. If you end up trying to play some kind of tricky game, like bidding only 1 so you take less damage or whatever, well, your opponent can get enough successful offensives to completely overrun the country. So you kind of have to put close to your maximum bid in there. And once you start doing that, you start taking significant casualties, and it's just ugly. Anyway, points have been spent. Nobody's got a huge stockpile anymore. They're the guys with a lot of money. And we'll go on. For the rest of the game, until the Great War kind of breaks out, the Western Allies have to worry about Germany, and they have to worry about them going into Poland or going into Czechoslovakia. That meant the British threw a bid in, the French and the British kind of had a head-to-head and said, look, one of us goes, the other one doesn't. And now the Brits are taking advantage of the democratic option, and they're going to pop down and trade places with the Germans, just dropping down one place. Japan has a huge bid in place so they can start the war. And I assume we're going to see that. The danger, of course, though, is Japan may find itself having a hard time building up their military. Among other things, they have to mobilize, and they kind of screwed up by not doing the mobilize last time. But in terms of timing, they want the war to start over here in the May-June phase, where there's a good chance of clear weather. That gives them a couple of months where the weather's good. So that's what they're going to go with. All right, well, we're going to start seeing the Chinese war open up now. Germany chose well. The Japanese, of course, did their attack. The Germans, seeing the Brits in position, know what they're going to do. So we're not going to do what we were planning on. So we spend our points instead supporting the Spanish, which England's not all that opposed to. We're not going to budge Spain from here, so we're going to let nationalist Spain take effect. That can be risky. If Germany has enough time, nationalist Spain, there's certain effects which give benefits to nationalist Spain for the Germans, and the Italians for that matter, more importantly. And then finally the Brits, well, they no longer have what they wanted to do. They could have also supported Spain, but like I said, they're not too impressed with that, so they upped their production multiples, and let's see, they grabbed Persia, pushed it way over here. I don't know. I don't remember. Austria got pushed into the German camp. I don't remember what the Japanese did. I think they grabbed Chile, and it's kicking around under here. No, they did not. Portugal. Yeah, Portugal, which is all the way over here now. Now, obviously, Japan, I don't think has. Yeah, they do have the opportunity to control Portugal, so that's theirs. There's no resources in Portugal, though. And you can see the Germans, after the Japanese went, ended up getting more points in Portugal, so they can try to budge that out. It's not trivial, though. Well, 2 points will do, Now it's time for the battles, and let's see what the weather is going to bring us. The weather's good, which means we get to shift things around. And this is done, the movement is done in reverse order, so the people with the highest initiative have the chance to do the most, to set up the battles the way they want them, and then the actual attacks are chosen in initiative order, which I don't know if that's as big a bonus. Being able to move last is a huge bonus. Being able to attack first, you tie up troops that maybe otherwise would be forced to retreat or something, I guess. There's some possibility the Chinese might do a counterattack in North China. North China falls to like 2 Japanese units just because of my numbers. I'm sending 30 though, the maximum I can across this border, and that's what China's counting on. They had enough to get 125%. So they have the 38 times 0.25. They're gonna lose only 10 units, whereas the Japanese are gonna lose half their 30, 15. So this is more expensive. Also, the Japanese failed to take a successful offensive. North China, I don't think counts against the U.S. totals. It specifies China, which could mean multiple things, but I don't think it means North China. So, we're going to end up kind of stalemated and not gaining any ground for now. But in the long run, Japan's production is high enough that they can afford to take these attritional losses. And one of the real problems here is the economies. For the Axis powers, their economies just can't match what they allow, the Western allies, once they mobilize their economies to achieve. And this is the ticking clock, you can punt the game around as long as you like, as Japan or Germany, as long as none of you kind of push above that 1 times multiple. But as soon as you go above it, you're able to do some political things you wouldn't. Now Japan's able to go above it, go into combat without it. Germany, though, is not. I mean, they are, but they're not able to grab Czechoslovakia, grab Poland until they hit that 2, and then all these resources that are all over, are just available to the Western allies, and they can just say, well, we're going to outproduce you, so you better get your ass in gear now. And this is what's happening. We're in 38. Germany has a real tight timeline. Now, they could just turn and attack. And, maybe that's a better move. Rather than trying to finesse the among other things, you have the Anschluss, which probably is useless. There's just nothing in Austria except for that connection into the Balkans, into Italy. I don't think it's worth doing, which I kind of don't like, but because that requires you to have above the multiplier of 2, of 1. Czechoslovakia, Poland, they each have a factory, they each have some resources. That's going to help your total. Germany's actually, I think, still making money because they have so many miners that they're able, to keep up at the same pace. But the problem is there's more Western allies than there are Germany's. So Italy, stuck down at 1, doesn't really have much room to expand. They have some additional... I think I owe them an extra $1 for Turkey that I didn't pay out. They have some additional capacity probably somewhere. I'm not positive, but based on the miners that are under control, etc., it's really tough to figure this thing out. It's like you have to key into that. I talked about this. Key into that over to here to see, oh wait, Romania. The Germans have 2 from Romania, but where's Romania? Romania is not really in favor of Germany right now, if I recall correctly. I think they're over with the Brits, which means shit, man. We're not getting the points coming out of Romania. Now, maybe if we support Romania's claims against Bulgaria, who's largely pro-Soviet, and Hungary, who is in our favor, but you know, doesn't have all that much, we'll be able to get them back on our side. But it's at a cost. We're not getting, you know, the historical outcome here at all. The Spanish War looks like it's over. The Germans have a pile of, well, the Axis have a whole pile of nationalists here. The British supported Spaniards. There's really nothing there. So unless Russia decides to ship their 6 troops in or whatever, I don't think anybody's going to be able to keep that from shifting back to the neutral center. So we'll see how that works. U.S. entry is around 25 against Japan. The actual number is 78, but when you calculate it all out, they're a little under 25, which is just, you know, they're not coming in real quick, which is good. And you just need much larger numbers than you think you do to get these to work. I'm not sure. I think the chits actually existed back in WIF 5, because I saw some discussion of them in the rules here, which means I can probably rationalize this game over to the WIF Deluxe Final Edition, whatever. Anyway, keep going with 38. I'm proceeding. I pulled my Chinese out of North China. I think those were the Chinese communists. Here's the problem. I have some vague memories out of World in Flames as to the Chinese. You know, they're in 2 separate factions. The Chinese communists can't go south of a certain line, or maybe it's the nationalists can't go north, or maybe it's just, you know, the realities of supply make it difficult to do so. Well, in this game, I can't find any special rules on China, except what's contained on these cards, and nothing that I've run across yet seems to indicate that the Chinese, or give specific rules that the Chinese communists, or that the units that start here are the Chinese communists. And these are important factors, because there are political choices which affect just the Chinese communists, or that affect the relationship between the 2 forces. And basically, without the Civil War, I've assumed that they're all China. I'm not sure they really are. I'm not sure that I should have been allowed to pull my Chinese down here. I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm probably going to call this pretty soon, because we're putting a lot of effort into this. It's interesting. It really is, and I'm having a hard time pulling away from it. But this was just meant to be an attempt to, you know, to learn DoD2 so that I could use it with WIF. I don't know. But yeah, I can't find anything, you know, that really seems to state how the 2 Chinese factions exist, come into being, what counters to use, what, you know, and then I do see one indication under some of the things, well, more than one maybe, but under something like this, the Chinese Civil War, share power with Mao, you can only play this option. All CCAPs turn to nationalists. Okay, well, that's kind of what I already have. But Chinese Civil War is, after playing the communists and nationalists are at war, I don't know if I was supposed to set up maybe Russian units there to begin with, or what. Anyway, we're not going to have a Chinese Civil War in this game. That's pretty clear, because the Japanese have already overrun Lanzhou in that area. So, I don't know. Which means I don't know quite what the Chinese think they can do with their points. Although I am wondering, I guess they haven't been building many troops. I think they'll probably just pass. It's the kind of alignment order that's really kind of dangerous. So, Japan and Russia bid, they had things they really want to do. Britain bid to try to make sure they're ahead of Germany. Germany's way down here. It is possible to get way down there, which means, unless France gets in action too, chances are that, you know, if it does get all the way down there, Germany's going to get a shot to do one of their land grabs, because there's no way, Britain's going to fall down all the way to there. They've got things they can do. It's unlikely for Germany to get there, but, this is the kind of situation where it can just slip through the cracks, and whatever protections you're doing aren't sufficient to prevent the Germans from getting something. In fact, it would have been even harder if they were in one of these couple of positions here, because still, those are kind of unlikely to get an action. Way down there, I can feel pretty safe they're not going to. Well, we're going to see some more ugliness happening, I think. Okay, for the simple reason that I kind of want to show the mechanisms in this game. My random chance said no, but I decided to do it anyway. Basically, the Western Allies and Germany came to the agreement because Russia has just declared war not only on Turkey, but on Finland and the Baltic states. Now, this is causing some serious destabilization, and England has the next initiative in play, and they have decided to support a German request to bring it to the League of Nations, since I haven't shown the League in play yet. Britain has to pay, I think it's 2 for a League of Nations vote. This is for an enough is enough resolution, which probably isn't going to do shit. It costs Britain 2. What it does is it gives everybody a casus belli as long as a certain country that Russia is at war with still exists. Now, we're certainly not going to call this on the Baltic states. The question is whether we'd rather do it to Finland or to Turkey. As things stand, it doesn't really matter. Whichever one we call it on, they're probably going to focus their attack on, because as soon as the war is over, if they conquer that enemy or whatever, the League of Nations vote doesn't hold, which is why it's not going to stand. Neither one has a very big army. So we're going to choose Turkey here. And now what we do is we see if anyone, who the temporary counselors are. Russia's not allowed to vote themselves on this, but countries like Bulgaria or Spain would be allowed to vote. So we get Argentina, Belgium, China, Norway, Portugal, and Turkey. I would say there are no votes there. Now, what I have to do is I have to figure out who's voting yes, because they are going to provide a +2 towards Britain for that. I should put a little British flag here so nobody else calls one. This also, because it's an enough is enough, is going to have an effect on U.S. entry, but it's pretty minor. So, yeah, we're looking at 2 points. And obviously, Germany's not going to make any yes votes, even though they wanted this. They don't want things, well, it depends on the country. They may want things to move towards Britain, actually. Germany, of course, did not take advantage of the opportunity to declare war on Russia at cheaper cost. No real desire for that from them. It did, I'm sorry, Italy did not. Italy took the Anschluss. They have an option as well as Germany to grab Austria. And it's kind of cool for them because they get 7 troops from it. It's hard for them to build troops, so taking an action to grab those, that'll help them towards maybe an advance into Yugoslavia, which might be dangerous because that puts them right up on the line on the Russians. Of course, Russia is unwilling to declare war on major powers, but it looks like they're pretty happy declaring war on things like Turkey. There are rules for limited war that are implied in some of these. I don't think they have any effect other than in China, where they seem to have some. I think you get a reduced penalty. Now, for example, there's an option for limited war against Romania, against Finland in WIF, and I would guess that they kind of feed into those. If you want to grab just Bessarabia, or if you want to grab just the Finnish border territories. But that's not what Russia wants. Russia wants to, Helsinki is an important victory condition, so they want to own that, right? and things along those lines. I recorded the bids, but now we come to the trouble where we're going to have, a lot of military action taking place. So I am going to have to put myself down here on weather, military affairs, and take quite a break before I proceed with those. Okay, and after I do the military and the economic, I'll get to the economic in a moment. Japan makes a little bit of an incursion into China. It doesn't gain them anything. Actually, I think it got them a resource here. But they have enough resources actually available right now. Russia gained some ground on Turkey, took over 2 of the 3 Baltic states. These are real pushovers. This is a tank. I don't have enough to cover everything, and with the Japanese in control. Finland, though, Finland's tough because it's got one of these unnoted borders, so it only allows 10 strength points across. That means I wasn't able to get enough troops into Finland, and I took kind of a defeat. But, the Finns aren't going to be able to come back into Russia. There were a lot of unallocated troops in Russia that could have defended. So they withheld from counterattacking. Here's a problem. So then when we hit production, the Turkish factories are allowed to produce for Turkey. And in fact, the Brits, being their not controlling, but whatever the hell it is, deciding, I don't know what the fuck term they used, power, are able to give them resources, either resources or factories. They don't need to do either yet, but the resources are going to be cut down once another territory falls, and Turkey's in a lot of trouble here. They're going to be a much easier pushover in this game than they would be in a World in Flames game. And the same is true about almost every power. And part of it is because terrain doesn't really matter. It's not adequately reflected on this board. But that's okay. This isn't really a military simulation. It's not a war game. It's a geopolitical game that meshes with a war game, if you wish. But I'm a little more disturbed in China. With a Chinese economic power, I built some additional armies. I forgot to build some more armies in Japan and Russia. Japan and Russia need to buy some more troops. I'll get to that in a bit, because they need to keep fueling their war effort. I'm not sure if anybody else needs to as well. So, for example, Germany may want to build troops because they may be looking at intervening in Poland so that they can go into Russia shortly. But here's the problem. There are a number of little things that seem weird. Like, if Germany supports Turkey in the war, why doesn't Turkey kind of fall into the pro-German camp? That's not likely to happen. If anything, Turkey's sitting over here kind of in the middle zone. They're not controlled by anyone. They don't have any power there. But the thing that I'm looking at that's particularly annoying, China gets to build their troops. Now, what China really wants here is the ability to... Oops. This actually didn't happen. I forgot. Japan's only in a limited war with China. They didn't get enough successes to pound into there. They needed like 5 successes to get 1. Which is cool because it means that the U.S. involvement only goes up by a half die for the limited war. Ooh, that's painful. So U.S. involvement goes up by 3 against Japan. We're up to 93 here. And you can see those are growing, but the Russian points are growing too, and those penalize any entry. I don't really know that the U.S. terribly wants to enter against Japan. But here's the deal. The U.S. would like to be able to, form an alliance with China. China's got to spend a fair amount of points, as does the U.S., but the U.S. has them, to have a chance to respond with the their zero option so that they can sign a treaty and start upgrading the Lend-Lease capabilities. By the time they do that, or by the time whatever, they may be gone. If this were a full war, and I kind of regret not going to full war because of the way this is skewed. If this were a full war, I think the Japanese have a pretty good chance of winning in China. The limited war they have a pretty tough time with. The disadvantage, of course, though, is going with the complete war. You need to get, what, 14 successes to conquer all of China? That's 14 dice of intervention points that the U.S. will get. You're going to bring the U.S. into the war with a full-scale invasion. But on the other hand, if you want to acquire the same stuff, you're going to bring the U.S. into the war anyway. So, you know, you just kind of have to count on that as likely to happen. Anyway, I'm going to load this one up. I think I'm going to do at least one more video just because this situation is so interesting. Except I kind of want to get to, you know, doing the whiff stuff, but and I kind of I have this feeling that, like, you know, I don't know whether or not I want to do this with whiff anymore. I think I'm still going to go with that original plan, but it's hard to stop playing this because this is a really cool little game on its own. I don't know how historically reasonable it is. You know, so for example, Russia's invasion of Turkey. But this is the kind of thing that I like in my World War II and World War I, my big global strategic. This is kind of like playing Pax Britannica in a way, which often ends up kind of weird. And then I want to play, you know, a big World War I game to fill in, you know, the final, when the Great War happens. And unfortunately, I haven't put any effort into trying to, you know, rationalize Pax with something like La Grande Guerre. And I don't think I have anything that it needs to be global scale, so I don't have anything else that would really work on the same level. So that would have to be the game that I would choose for. But yeah, geez, I don't know. Well, I may just come back with some whiff stuff and say, well, I gave up on Days of Decision because I didn't want to just keep plugging through it. I mean, it is not a short game. You can see I'm partway through 38, and the war, I don't think terribly makes the game more complicated. It adds some levels to it, but the combat system is so abstracted and, you know, just this bidding for each entry that it doesn't really have, you know, the same kind of massive effect. What I would do with the limited war, if I wanted to make rules for that, is I'd give it the same rules as China has implied somewhere, not really clearly spelled out. The 1/5, I mean, that is spelled out, but it's not in the best of places, if I recall correctly. The 1/5 offensive capability, and I would give well, there's really almost no reason to do it. You know, maybe give a lesser entry cost for the U.S., and that's it, you know, because it's not really a limited war. The goals, the aims aren't limited by, you know, on the map or anything. All right, let's send this up and package it, and we'll see if I keep going. I might end up with like a 10-minute video after this where I play another turn and then say, all right, I'm done, you know.